Why do we fall? So that we can learn to pick ourselves up.
The core element of the Dark Knight trilogy is the rise and fall of Bruce Wayne. It is a personal character arc defined by grief, rage, redemption, and finally acceptance. The persistence of fear is instilled into the structure of the films when put together as one 3-arc journey. For that reason alone, I do not view the Batman films as 3 separate motion pictures. Instead, I like to think of them as a 9-hour-long movie. One could argue, for that reason alone, that the Dark Knight trilogy is the greatest cinematic experience of all time.
My mother warned me about getting into cars with strange men.
This isn't a car.
To really understand the inherent quality of the storytelling provided in Bruce Wayne's arc in the Dark Knight trilogy, it is important to note the nature of the man behind the mask. Bruce Wayne is not a whole human being. A part of his soul was stolen from him the night his parents were murdered. That void was later replaced with the brooding vigilante we know as the Silent Hero. What amazes me with the Dark Knight trilogy is how much Christopher Nolan allows the character of Batman to become more than just a person. Batman became a symbol of hope for the people of Gotham City. He was a movement of liberation and justice. And he was really freaking cool doing it. In Batman Begins, Bruce begins his story as a man who is fueled by the desire for vengeance. When Bruce brutally beats his prisoners, only for the purpose of enlarging the rage of the demon inside of him, he already knows the inherent truth that lies within his heart, that justice and vengeance are never the same. By the end of The Dark Knight, Bruce sacrifices his dignity and his reputation for the protection of Harvey Dent. He understood that Harvey was a beacon of light for his people. He knew that they needed him to be the hero they wanted. All the while, he understood that he would have to go into hiding. He made that selfless sacrifice, despite the consequences he would face for it, and he did it for the betterment of the people of Gotham City.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Similarly, at the end of The Dark Knight Rises, Bruce once again sacrifices himself to save Gotham City, despite the crime and inherent darkness that has polluted the area. Bruce was forced to conquer his fear of death by, quite literally, flying into the air with a bomb on his back. He took the rage from inside of him that we were introduced to at the very beginning of Batman Begins, and he transformed it into a selfless act to save the lives of millions of people. This was the perfect conclusion to the character arc of Bruce Wayne, as it delicately shows the audience how far he has come from the shadow of the man he was before.
See, their morals, their code, it's a bad joke.
Of course, I cannot see myself making a video about the Dark Knight trilogy without mentioning the excellent uses of villains in the 3-arc journey, more specifically, the introduction of Heath Ledger as the Joker and Tom Hardy as Bane. Heath Ledger gave the performance of his life as the Joker, and after a couple of rewatches, I can safely say I do not think anyone could ever replace his nuanced performance of the spine-chilling Mr. J.
I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you a stranger.
To me, Bane was my favorite villain from the Christopher Nolan Batman films, only because while I feel the Joker ensured Batman would question himself and his morals, he was truly broken by Bane.
What are you? I'm Gotham's reckoning.
The reason I feel Bane worked the best as a villain for the entire trilogy is because his character forced Bruce to examine the darker parts of him that he wanted to avoid. By far, my favorite sequence in the trilogy was Bruce's task to escape the cave he was dropped into in The Dark Knight Rises. This was more of a mental journey rather than a physical one. The whole purpose of the Rises film was to highlight the importance of overcoming one's fear of failure, or in other words, the courage to rise from the ashes.
What does that mean?
Rise.
As mentioned directly in the film, Bruce had to learn to jump without the rope holding him back. We are taught here that the fear of falling is the only way one can thrive out of a darker place. Bruce falls time after time, but once he lets go of the rope, he jumps with a strive to survive. He not only jumps for himself, but he lands for the people of Gotham City. General themes aside, I really do feel this movie franchise has a special place in my heart. I always thought of Christopher Nolan as an aspirational director, but nothing really captured my heart the way his Dark Knight trilogy did. While I always thought Batman was cool, I never really read the comics, so I didn't necessarily understand the meaning of the character and what Bruce Wayne as a person stood for. And I feel Christopher Nolan captured that perfectly by not only highlighting what makes him a hero, but also giving us time to explore his flaws as a human being. The reason I love the Batman films is because they portray Bruce Wayne as a primary character and the Batman as a supporting role. We learn about Bruce from the moment the first scene in Batman Begins starts. A lot of people actually complain that we don't get enough Batman action in these films. I digress. I strongly disagree. This is a story about redemption and beauty, not to mention the amazing cinematography by Christopher Nolan and the amazing score by Hans Zimmer. All of these aspects, along with amazing performances by supporting cast such as Michael Caine as Alfred, Anne Hathaway as Catwoman, and of course Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox, they all come together to create one giant masterpiece. I'm sure you guys know by now, I get very emotionally invested in films, but I still don't think I've ever cried as hard as I did when I first reacted to The Dark Knight Rises. I felt so uplifted at a time where I really needed a hero like Batman to motivate me. And I think that's why the Dark Knight trilogy hasn't left my mind since I reacted to those movies back in the beginning of 2021. I really felt inspired by these films, and I really hope that this video helped you guys understand why. I really do believe it is the perfect trilogy, and dare I say, it's my favorite trilogy of all time. To me, nothing really came close to the emotional substance that this film had to offer. So if you ever want to make a difference in the world, try watching The Dark Knight Rises. I'm pretty sure it will give you the inspiration to do so. Be a hero in your own right, just as Bruce Wayne found a way to become one himself.